Hi again, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're so happy you could join us. We have here today Tamar Belkin, brings VP Marketing, to discuss the new rules of delivery logistics in the e-commerce era.
Thanks, Sasha. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. So I want to talk about delivery logistics in retail, obviously. Now, this didn't used to be a cool and interesting subject, but it's completely transformed over the past couple of years. I could actually talk about it for hours, but since we only have half an hour and I still want to make sure I have time for answer some questions, I'll talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll still have time for Q&A session. So as Sasha mentioned, enter any questions you may have through the system. I promise to get to them either during the webinar or offline if we run out of time. So let's start. In general, retailers always had delivery logistics somewhere on their to-do list, but over the past couple of years, they realized they have to quickly move it over to somewhere around the top of their list. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a pure online play or originally brick and mortar, all retailers have to quickly figure out the issue of delivery logistics. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell any of you about the rapid growth in the e-commerce market or about the Amazon effect or about the growing pressure on retailers for perfect delivery experiences. That's all been thoroughly discussed. The question we will be discussing today is what to actually do about it and how to make the guy in the pictures who's pretty pissed off, how to make him happy. Or in other words, how to profitably deliver products in a way that really satisfies this guy and every customer's growing expectations. Now, it's obvious that the expectations surrounding online fulfillment have changed, and there's absolutely no going back. Customers simply take their loyalty elsewhere if any link in the delivery chain doesn't meet their standards. But unfortunately, there is still a very sizable gap between consumer expectations and the retailer's ability to address them. And you and every retailer out there need to quickly bridge that gap or get left behind. Now, it's not easy anymore to achieve perfect deliveries, or rather, it was never easy, but now it's especially not easy because expectations are simply sky high. So well, actually, we are demanding fast and accurate deliveries that arrive exactly when and where we want them to. Now, who cares about costs or about whatever courier availability? As you can see from the guy in the picture, the only thing people care about is getting whatever it is they ordered as soon as possible. Now, for retailers, deliveries are sometimes the only offline touch point that customers have with their brand, which makes the delivery experience just as important as the shopping experience. And if any consumer can search and find the deal or delivery options that work best for them, and very easily do that, retailers have no choice. If they want to remain viable, they need to meet customer expectations. And this has been proven multiple times. Just a couple of stats data points. 61% of e-commerce shoppers purchase from the retailer that provides them with more delivery choices. That's 61%, nearly 2/3. And even more, 87% of them would be highly more likely to shop again with a merchant if they had a positive delivery experience. So the bottom line is, how can you avoid annoying the guy in the picture? It's easy. You need to provide him with a delightful and personalized delivery experience. Now that sounds great, but to do that, you need to invest both time and money in order to completely rethink the way you deliver. So what's the situation in the market? We're basically looking at Amazon versus the world. So let's take the US market as an example, even though this is probably applicable to most, if not all, developed countries. So out of the $5 trillion retail market in the US, just over 8% is now e-commerce. By the way, in China, e-commerce is more than 20% of the retail market. And out of those 8%, Amazon currently controls 44% of the e-commerce market in the US. And if we take into account the global retail industry with its $23 trillion, you start to realize how much room there still remains for growth and why so many retailers are scared of Amazon. The next stat is even more astonishing in my mind. Amazon invested more than $23 billion on R&D last year. I repeat that, $23 billion. And with part of this money, they built state-of-the-art delivery management systems, which ensure that they have happy customers all around the world. Now, most other retailers, except very few, simply don't have the budget to develop these kinds of systems. This leaves this means that they just are using outdated delivery tools designed, 5, 10, 20 years ago, when nobody even imagined the challenges and demands we would be facing today when it comes to delivery. This is a very telling quote from Capgemini. The last mile is a strategic focus for Amazon, far beyond most of their competitors. So let's take a look at a few more stats to understand why. Okay, first stat, 86% of retailers think their supply chains are not up to the e-commerce challenge. Another stat is that 81% of them believe they need to completely transform the supply chain if they want to succeed. In fact, there was a study which predicted that introducing completely digital processes increases the financial value of a typical retail supply chain by 60%, which is obviously huge. Finally, if we look at the consumers, it's no surprise that, considering what we just said and the inefficiencies in most supply chain, it's no surprise that 30% of deliveries don't reach their intended destination on the first attempt. And again, it's no surprise that 71% of retailers said that improving access to order, consumer, and carrier data for all their teams, for services and operations and logistics, was either crucial or very important to them. Just a couple more stats to illustrate how important delivery is to consumers before we move on to the practical stuff. 76% of consumers view the delivery experience as the true test of how much a company values them. I'll say that again. That's delivery is the true test of how much a company values them. That stat could never have existed in the past. Another one is 20% rank delivery as the driving factor when shopping online, second only after price, which was selected by 23%. So after price, you have delivery, and you simply can't ignore that anymore. Another quote from Gartner this time really sums up what we just talked about, and this is where the differentiation lies. Customer experience, or in our case, the delivery their customer's delivery experience. So let's look at the practical stuff. What challenges are retailers facing in the Amazon era when it comes to delivery? I think we've all understood by now the importance of offering perfect delivery experiences. So whether you're delivering to homes, to offices, to lockers, to convenience stores, it doesn't matter. The last mile is your unique opportunity to really build a loyal base of customers, of the repeat customers that keep your brand alive. I've heard it say that it's sort of like a first date. It's a great opportunity to make a good impression, just like all first dates. Bit awkward sometimes, but still. You can establish a personal connection, and then set the stage for ongoing engagement. And just like on a first date, if you screw up that first meeting, you're unlikely to get a second chance. So what are the challenges involved in retailers getting it right? So we've got 8 here. First, the quickly growing demand, which I've already touched on. E-commerce is still less than 10% of the retail market in the US. So it will only keep growing. Demand will only keep growing. And while retailers may offer other options, home delivery will continue to be the primary choice for consumers. Each and every retailer out there has to quickly work to get their delivery services ready. Second thing is their increased reliance on 3PLs. Retailers, the third-party logistics providers that they're working with to fulfill online demand, the reliance will only grow. And so will the competition, of course, among the 3PLs. And then retailers are left to choose among the very competitive 3PL field. So when it comes to delivery experience, the key points you have to remember are, number one, The service provider has to have the technology in place for efficient and accurate deliveries. Otherwise, it just won't work out. And number two, they need to be able to provide your customers with a fully branded engagement. So although somebody else is providing your service, it has to be under your brand because you're ultimately responsible for the customer. A related issue is who has the responsibility over the last mile. If you want to succeed, you have to solidify the relationship with your brand. There's just no other way around it. But how can you maintain control over the last mile if you're relying on somebody else? You will. The bottom line is that you will need to consider whether you want to take that out of your purview, work with 3PLs or other delivery service providers if it's couriers or crowdsourced services, or you can bring your last mile fulfillment in-house, and then you have full control over everything. Next is, and just as important, is the subject of same day and next day shipments. Now, Amazon has gotten every one of us so used to fast deliveries, but most retailers just find same day, next day shipments so costly that they simply can't afford to offer them. Or they can do so at a loss, which is not much better. Um, Another thing to consider, another challenge, is the need for more logistics space. As you probably know, e-commerce requires much more logistics space compared to brick and mortar. Actually, it requires 3 times as much because retailers have to stock a greater variety of SKUs. They also need to have the physical space for processing both online orders and returns. This is in addition to the need to have these fulfillment centers closer to major population centers for faster deliveries, obviously. So one after the other, we have huge challenges here, but don't worry, there's a solution for everything out there. A couple more things. I briefly mentioned returns. Post-purchase services is a whole other issue. So what do you need? You need the physical space. You need to manage the logistics. For example, do you allow online shoppers to return items in store or not? And for some, the fact that a retailer knows how to efficiently, for some consumers, obviously, the fact that a retailer knows how to efficiently manage the returns process is nearly as important as the delivery itself. Fulfillment options. You can offer everything from buy online, ship to store. You can offer delivery to lockers, convenience stores. You know, we're looking even at delivery to cars these days. But as more and more options sort of gain popularity, you will need to make sure that you can maintain so many touch points if you offer multiple touch points, obviously. And you need them to all be effective so everybody's happy. So not the home delivery versus lockers versus ship to store, etc. And finally, of course, costs, which is one of the biggest hurdles retailers need to overcome. The costs of fulfillment, I don't know if you've seen the stat, but the costs of fulfillment are now up to an average of 18% of every retail dollar you earn. So it's only expected that retailers are having a really difficult time making a profit there. In order to manage these costs and consumers consumers looking for free delivery, you will find that implementing the right technologies is now a must-have. Otherwise, it's just not financially viable. So now that we've gone over all these issues, all these challenges, we get to the heart or to the meat of this presentation, which is the new rules. So what do retailers need to look into when they're addressing the issue of delivery logistics? There are 6 key rules that cover these best practices, and there's no other way but to adopt them if you really want to have efficient delivery operations. And these days, having state-of-the-art delivery operations is one of the only ways to establish a clear edge in your market. So as all the stats before showed you, there's just no way to avoid it. Now, of course, this is general. Every company will need to tweak the process a bit to make sure it fits their need, but the basics remain the same, and they're all centered around 2 things, or 3 things rather: digital processes, technologies, and a comprehensive customer-centric strategy. So let's go through the 6 rules quickly. Well, try to do it not too quickly, but we're already 15 minutes in. So first and foremost, you need to focus on the customer experience. The last mile is one of your only opportunities. I think I mentioned this, your only opportunities to establish a long-lasting relationship with your customers. What you have to keep in mind at all times is their desire for flexibility and their desire for visibility, which again can be provided using the right technology. The bottom line, focus your entire supply chain on providing a seamless and branded delivery experience so you can really create that personal connection. Oh, I missed that. Okay, second rule. Second rule centers around optimized operations. Now, you can't focus on only on how many fulfillment options you offer, since that alone won't help you if you don't execute properly. So you need to work on making your operations more efficient, but making your processes more agile so that you're able to handle any request or any last minute change that consumers have, anything that breaks down could potentially break down your process. You also need to improve information sharing across your entire team. And finally, if you really want to get that efficiency in place, you need to provide everyone with full visibility, and that's internal and external, but specifically internal here, so that everybody, your entire staff has everything they need in order to get their job done right. Third rule, well, this is actually, it's not an easy one, but it actually combines the first and second rules. And the point here is very significant. Customer experience, that's rule number 1, plus operational efficiency, rule number 2, creates logistical excellence across the entire ecosystem. That's our most important equation, if we want to call it that. The point here is that you can't do only one or the other. You have to do both if you really want to do a good job. So shipping in 20 minutes like Amazon might not be an option for you, but anyone can start using the technologies to do this. And I can't stress this enough. You need to address both the front end customer experience and the back end field operations. The fourth is thinking of the entire ecosystem. So you've done all this work, you've done customer experience, operational efficiency, you reach logistical excellence, but you need to consider the fourth point here, which is doing this for the entire ecosystem. How does it affect the different participants? How do you balance everyone's need? You need to talk, and we're talking the entire ecosystem. We're talking everything from management at headquarters to your on-site staff in the field, your customer support staff, your drivers, your logistical providers, and of course the end customers at the end of the line. The bottom line, becoming more efficient across the entire ecosystem gets everybody a better delivery experience. Ability to scale. So now you've done great work. Things are going great. Deliveries are going smoothly. And now you need to scale quickly, even if it's just for the holidays. So of course, the way to do this depends on whether you're doing this in-house or with a third party. But either way, you have to be able to quickly scale up and down as needed. And the key here is to create an operational structure from the start. So you have to start thinking about this from the very first step when you go into delivery logistics. And the structure you build has to be elastic enough to quickly meet your needs, any point in time, anywhere. And that means you have to have access to the resources in general that can be added at a moment's notice. Final key point or key rule actually, to getting these things right is to leverage technology. There's no other way. We're of course somewhat biased as a technology company, but I think everybody understands and will agree that you can't do this without the right technology. Now that's the key to success. And that typically means a centralized platform that can handle everything we discussed so far, especially one that can be integrated into all your other systems, ordering, billing, etc. And going back to the previous slide about the billions of dollars Amazon spends on R&D and how almost nobody can catch up, You need to find the platform that is right for you, but the most important point is make sure it was built recently. Existing logistics solutions built even 5 years ago were not designed to handle the Amazon effect or consumer expectations. They have to be designed, they have to have been designed recently to handle the demands of the e-commerce era. So we've gone through the main six rules that we talked about. And this quote from Forrester just goes to show how important they are in general, and of course, delivery specifically for us. This customer, thinking about this customer obsessed mindset brings to mind a couple of things. So first of all, it has never been more important. We all have to remember this. It has never been more important for retailers to make sure they provide their customers with the perfect delivery experience. I've shown you stats. I've talked about this. I think it's clear, but still, it's one of the most important things. And there are several issues that you need to keep in mind here. One of them that makes things much more complex when it comes to deliveries is that you simply can't pass on the delivery costs to the customers, obviously. At least not if you want to maintain good relationships with them, especially with recent surveys showing that free delivery is the most important fulfillment option retailers need to offer. So costs are yours, they want free, you're sort of stuck in the middle. Other factors, flexibility and personalization. So these days, shoppers, and we all know this from personal experience. I don't necessarily want my deliveries sent to their home. Maybe I want to my office or somewhere else. I don't want to change their plans because I have to wait for the courier. I don't want those packages sitting outside my home. The bottom line is that you can no longer take your time delivering these packages and expecting that customers will be available whenever the courier arrives. So provide that flexibility, and just as important is open communications lines, so everybody can talk to everybody and provide real-time visibility. In fact, there was I think this was the last stat that I'll share with you. There was a recent survey that showed that 47% of consumers have chosen not to order from a retailer again because, and I quote, poor order transparency or a lack of insight into the status of their packages. So they can't know if the consumer, nearly half of consumers, if they can't see where your package is, they'll just pass it on, or pass on it rather. Okay, this is just about the end of my presentation. One last sentence, I guess, before we get to the question. The bottom line, as I mentioned, all these issues, everything else I discussed previously, one thing in common. You must, as retailers, establish a customer-centric view of the delivery process. That's the only way to ensure that you're viable in the long term. And of course, whenever I talk retailers, their service providers are relevant as well. So I think that's it. And now we can pass on.
Thank you, Tamar. That was great. We only have time for one or two questions. We'll start with, can you give us an example of how retailers are using the Bring solution?
Thanks, Sasha. Okay, we have quite a bunch of customers. Let's see, I think maybe I'll give a couple of examples. There are retailers or companies in general who are ahead of the crowd and already using these types of systems with great benefits. For example, I'm sure everyone out there who's heard of Panera Bread and has likely seen their recent ad campaigns for deliveries. Even if you haven't, they've rolled it out recently to most of their branches, and they're getting great results. So what they started to do is looking at digital innovation throughout their operations, from how to capture orders, how the kitchen is running, how deliveries get handled, and they built up something they call Panera 2.0 and deployed it across their entire ecosystem so that restaurants can operate autonomously, but while their management can also still centrally monitor them and control them. They use basically the technology, in this case powered by Bring, to orchestrate every touch point. As soon as a customer places an order, all the systems are notified, start working towards the delivery point, which is the end point of the process. Now, this is just one example. There are plenty of others out there. Bring, for example, is working with the largest e-commerce retailers in France, who are second and third on the list only after Amazon. There are several more very well-known US retailers we'll be announcing soon. I'm afraid I can't talk about them yet, but they all identified technology as the key to success and decided to invest in order to provide really a differentiated experience to their customers.
Thanks, Tamar. We have another question. How long would it take and how many resources would be needed to implement these suggestions in a typical retail organization?
We get that quite a lot, and people think, this looks huge, this is so complicated, but actually, we count our time in weeks, not in months. So the agility, and because time to market is so essential these days, we do it. We can get retailers up and running really quickly. And again, I can only talk about our experience, but it's not as difficult as it may seem, or it's not as scary as it may seem. Maybe that's the right phrase. So we come in, evaluate your existing operations to figure out what you need to deploy and what will quickly bring the most value to you. And then normally our projects are live in 4 to 6 weeks. Larger ones maybe a little more, and smaller ones maybe a little less, but the average is 4 to 6 weeks. And our phase approach is just what's been working for the last 2-3 years for Bring, so we can do the most valuable things first, set up the necessary platforms, and start working almost immediately in a live environment. So we can start with one branch or one store and then roll out to the rest. Now, in terms of resources, every business will have its resources. Even if you have zero resources, we will use our own resources to assist you. But most times what we start with is forming a joint group. We have a project manager on our side, we have a project manager on the customer side, and together they work to get everything done.
Thank you, Tamar. I want to thank everyone who joined us. We'll be sending the webinar recording to everyone so you can send it to others in your organization who may not have been able to join us today. We did have a few other questions, so if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you by email after the webinar. A survey should pop up on your screen momentarily for you to answer a few short questions. Thank you again, and we hope to see you again in our next webinar.